My wife said she needed a break from our marriage. Not a divorce. Not separation. Just space. At first, I tried to understand her. I convinced myself this was temporary. That maybe time apart would help us reconnect and fix what had slowly broken between us. But deep down, something felt wrong. Because while I was sitting alone trying to save my marriage, she seemed happier the farther she got from me. Then suddenly, after months away, she wanted to come back. Just like that. No warning. No explanation. No real answers. And when I finally looked at her and said, "You asked for this marriage break, so why the sudden U-turn?" The truth that followed changed everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and what people really do when they think nobody's watching. Stay until the end, because this story isn't just about infidelity. It's about regret. There's a specific kind of silence that exists inside a dying marriage. Not the loud kind filled with screaming or slammed doors. I mean the quiet silence. The kind where two people sit across from each other at dinner and realize they've run out of things to say months ago. That was us. For almost a year, my wife and I had been drifting apart without admitting it out loud. We still functioned like a married couple on the surface. We paid bills together. Went to family events. Slept in the same bed. But emotionally? We were living separate lives. At first, I blamed stress. Work had become demanding for both of us. Long hours. Exhaustion. Routine. Life had slowly drained the excitement out of our relationship, replacing it with schedules and obligations. But eventually I noticed something deeper. She had stopped looking at me the way she used to. There was no warmth anymore. No curiosity. No effort. And then one evening, while sitting on the balcony with a glass of wine in her hand, she finally said the words I think she'd been rehearsing for months. "I think we need a break." Just like that. Calm. Controlled. Almost rehearsed. I stared at her for several seconds. "A break?" She nodded slowly. "I need space to think." "Think about what?" "About us." Those two words hit harder than I expected. About us. As if our marriage had become some complicated decision she was no longer sure she wanted to keep making. I remember laughing quietly, though there was nothing funny about the moment. "You're talking like we're dating, not married." She sighed. "That's exactly the problem." I leaned back in my chair, trying to understand how we had gotten there. What does a break even mean? She avoided my eyes. "It means time apart." "How long?" "I don't know." That answer irritated me immediately. Because uncertainty is crueler than honesty. If she wanted out, I almost wished she'd just say it directly. But instead, she gave me something vague. Something open-ended. Something painful enough to keep me emotionally trapped while she figured herself out. I asked her the question I had been avoiding since the conversation started. "Is there someone else?" She looked offended instantly. "No." The answer came too quickly. Too clean. But I didn't push further. Partly because I didn't want to hear the truth. And partly because I was afraid I already knew it. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in the house changed completely. She became strangely lighter. Almost relieved. Meanwhile, I felt like I was slowly suffocating. Then one morning she packed a suitcase. Not much. Just enough to make the reality sink in. As she stood near the front door, she looked at me carefully. "This doesn't mean I don't care about you." I remember staring at her, exhausted and emotionally numb. "Then why does it feel like you already left a long time ago?" She didn't answer. Because I think we both knew I was right. And just before she walked out the door, she said something that stayed with me for weeks afterward. "Maybe this break will help us find each other again." At the time, I didn't realize she had already started finding someone else instead. The first few weeks without her were strangely confusing. Part of me missed her terribly. The other part felt relieved. Relieved not to wake up next to emotional distance every morning. Relieved not to force conversations that went nowhere. Still, despite everything, I believed the break was temporary. That's what people do when they love someone. They convince themselves the pain has an expiration date. At first, she checked in often. Small messages. How are you? Did you eat? Hope work went okay. It felt polite. Too polite. Like communication between coworkers instead of husband and wife. Then slowly, the messages became less frequent. Shorter. Colder. And something about her social media activity started bothering me. New clothes. New restaurants. New energy. She looked happier away from me than she had looked in years beside me. That realization hurt more than the separation itself. One night, a mutual friend accidentally mentioned seeing her downtown with people I didn't recognize. She seemed like she was having fun, he said casually. I smiled like it didn't affect me. But inside, something twisted painfully. Because I suddenly understood something important. While I was grieving our marriage, she was enjoying her freedom. A week later, she came by the house unexpectedly to pick up more clothes. The moment she walked in, I noticed the difference immediately. She looked alive again. Confident. Relaxed. Like someone rediscovering herself. And strangely, that version of her irritated me. Not because she looked happy, but because I realized I hadn't seen that happiness in years. Thanks for letting me come by, she said casually. I nodded. Then finally asked the question that had been sitting in my chest for weeks. So, what exactly are we doing here? She paused while folding clothes into a bag. I told you. I needed space. You seem pretty comfortable with that space. She looked at me carefully. What's that supposed to mean? It means you don't look like someone trying to fix a marriage. That comment clearly annoyed her. She crossed her arms. Not everything is about another person. There it was again. That answer. Technically believable. Emotionally dishonest. I stared at her for several seconds before finally saying what had been building inside me for weeks. You asked for this break. So why does it feel like you already made up your mind before leaving? For the first time, she looked uncomfortable. But only briefly. Then she said quietly. Maybe I just needed to remember who I was outside this marriage. And somehow, that hurt worse than if she had admitted cheating. Because it meant our marriage had become something she needed to escape from. 3 months passed. 3 long, emotionally exhausting months. Then suddenly, everything changed. She started calling more often. Texting first. Checking in constantly. At first I assumed guilt had finally caught up to her. But then came the bigger surprise. One evening she asked to meet for dinner. Not to discuss paperwork. Not logistics. An actual dinner. And during that dinner, after almost an hour of awkward conversation, she finally said it. I want to come home. I nearly laughed from disbelief. Because this was the same woman who claimed she needed freedom. Space. Distance. Now suddenly she wanted back in? I leaned back slowly and looked at her carefully. You asked for a marriage break, I said calmly. So why the sudden U-turn? She froze slightly. Almost like she expected me to immediately welcome her back without questions. I've had time to think, she said softly. And I realized I still love you. The words sounded sincere. But something about the timing bothered me. Because people rarely reverse emotional decisions that quickly without a reason. What changed? I asked. She hesitated. Too long. Then finally answered. I realized the grass isn't always greener. That sentence told me more than she intended. Because suddenly, everything made sense. The confidence. The freedom. The excitement. And now, the return. Something hadn't gone the way she expected. I didn't know whether it was another man, loneliness, disappointment, or reality finally setting in. But I knew one thing. This wasn't the same woman who left my house months ago. This woman looked humbled. And for the first time, uncertain. After she moved back in, things felt strangely delicate. Like rebuilding a house after a fire. Everything looked familiar, but the damage was impossible to ignore. At first, she tried hard. Cooking again. Starting conversations. Touching me more often. Trying to recreate intimacy. But something inside me had shifted during her absence. I no longer trusted her emotionally. And trust changes everything. One night while lying in bed, I finally asked the question I had avoided for months. Was there someone else? The room became very quiet. She stared at the ceiling for several seconds before answering. There were people I talked to. That wasn't a denial. I turned toward her slowly. Did you sleep with anyone? She hesitated again. And in that silence, I got my answer. Oddly enough, I didn't explode. Didn't yell. Didn't rage. Because by then, I already suspected it. What hurt most wasn't the possibility of another man. It was realizing she needed outside validation to decide whether our marriage still mattered. Then she whispered something unexpected. I thought I wanted a different life. I stayed silent. But eventually I realized I was running from myself, not from you. That sentence stayed with me. Because deep down, I think many people destroy good relationships chasing temporary feelings they mistake for freedom. It took almost a year for us to truly reconnect. Not because love disappeared, but because rebuilding emotional safety takes time. A lot of time. And strangely, the marriage that emerged afterward was more honest than the one we had before. Not perfect, but real. Because now there were no illusions left. No pretending. No fantasy version of life outside marriage. One evening, long after the chaos settled, she asked me something quietly. Do you regret taking me back? I thought about it carefully before answering. No. She looked surprised. Why not? I looked at her for a long moment before speaking. Because losing you forced me to stop taking myself for granted too. That answer made her cry unexpectedly. And in that moment, I realized something important. Sometimes relationships don't collapse because people stop loving each other. Sometimes they collapse because people stop understanding themselves. The break nearly destroyed us. But it also exposed truths we had buried for years. About loneliness. About ego. About the dangerous excitement of temporary freedom. And about how easy it is to confuse emotional restlessness with unhappiness. To this day, nobody knows our names. Nobody knows the full story. And maybe that's for the best. Because some lessons don't need public judgment. They just need honesty. And sometimes, the thing that changes everything isn't losing someone. It's realizing why they left in the first place. Sometimes people think freedom will make them happy, until they discover what they were really running from. This story wasn't just about a marriage break. It was about emotional distance, hidden truths, loneliness, and the painful realization that some choices can permanently change the way two people see each other. The hardest part wasn't the separation. It was realizing how close we came to losing everything before we finally understood ourselves. If this story touched you, shocked you, or reminded you of something personal, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Would you have taken her back? And if you enjoy powerful relationship dramas, emotional confessions, and mature storytelling filled with twists and life lessons. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing in a marriage isn't betrayal. It's silence. Disclaimer. This is a fictional story created for entertainment and storytelling purposes only. Any resemblance to real persons or events is purely coincidental. Viewer discretion is advised, as this content explores mature emotional and relationship themes. Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe for more powerful, emotional storytelling and dramatic life lessons.